There was a time when the news delivered truth,
It still seems like a dream.
when integrity was paramount,
I cannot contend that I have always been right or wise.
and trusted voices guided a nation.
How do you measure such an astonishing moment?
Today, the headlines are blurred, the signal lost in the noise of corporate agendas and paid narratives.
Vocal anti-vaxxer.
Deranged lies.
It is humiliating.
What happened to the truth? It hasn't disappeared. It's simply moved. The Maha Report brings you unfiltered, independent journalism covering the issues of the Make America Healthy Again movement. Rediscover the facts and reclaim the truth. Subscribe now at themahareport.com.
Still calling your congressman? Waiting on hold? Hoping someone took your message?
Thank you for calling.
There's a better way to do this. The Maha Legislative Tracker lets you browse every Maha bill. Pick the ones that matter to you and send a letter to your rep with a single click. Search federal, by state, or by the issues you care about most. Take 60 seconds and make it count. Your voice can make America healthy again at mahaaction.org.
Welcome to the Maha Media Hub, and welcome to the Maha Revolution. I'm Tony Lyons, president of Maha Action. If you spent any time watching this show, you know that we talk a lot about challenging the status quo and questioning authority and staying open to the possibility that we can be wrong. There's no such thing as settled science. There never could be, and there never will be. We're not here to swap out one dogma for another one. We're here to follow the truth wherever it takes us. And here's the thing about paradigm shifts. They're always met with pushback, with resistance. It's painful to admit that established ways of thinking are wrong, that they got it wrong. And it's expensive, too, for the people who had that wrongful way of thinking. When reputations and institutions and enormous financial institutions are on the line, people dig in. And that instinct to protect a narrow vision of the truth, even when the evidence is overwhelming and is pointing somewhere else, that's where corruption comes in. And that's what stands in the way of progress. For decades, companies have made products that harm children and contributed to chronic disease, including, of course, autism. And they worked hard, really hard, to convince parents, teachers, doctors, government agencies, scientists, everybody that these conditions were purely genetic. They had nothing to do with the environment, nothing to do with medical interventions, nothing to do, of course, with vaccines. And they funded the research that backed up those lies. They shaped media coverage with their advertising dollars, and they influenced what doctors taught in medical school or what they were taught in medical school and what they told to parents and children. But every so often, real evidence gets out, incontrovertible evidence that cracks all of the deeply held beliefs. Think about things like thimerosal and vaccines. Think about the injuries caused by thalidomide, the opioid crisis, the Tuskegee experiments on or vaccine injuries, or medical malpractice being the leading cause of death in this country. These kinds of things are reminders that the medical establishment has fooled us time after time. They've got it wrong. They've lied. They've made mistakes. But even if they were trying hard to get it right, science is never static. And history is filled with examples of experts in all areas getting things wrong. Today, we're going to talk about another breakthrough that's running into the same kind of brick wall, the same resistance from entrenched orthodoxy, from systems and industries that have a lot invested in keeping things the way they are, in the status quo. And what you're about to see is extraordinary. You're going to see a way for non-speaking people with autism to unlock their voices and show the world who they really are. Spelling to Communicate and the rapid prompting method are transforming lives all across the country. Families who were told their children were cognitively impaired are finding out something starkly different. Autism is a neurological disease. It's not a cognitive impairment. And yet, like every disruptive advance, these methods are getting pushed back. Parts of the speech therapy world, parts of the behavioral therapy world, pieces of the broader autism community, they're gatekeeping access to communication. Even the New York Times, that, of course, we know they get it wrong almost all the time. They've said just last week that these methods, that spelling on a letterboard has been debunked, that it just doesn't work, it's not real. But we know it is real, and thousands of parents know it's real. But, when a paradigm shift threatens assumptions and systems and revenue, it's hard to break. So one of my favorite old quotes is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he says, "Our life is an apprenticeship to the truth that around every circle another can be drawn, that there's no end in nature, that everything is a new beginning." And our understanding has to keep evolving, and our knowledge has to keep growing, and people have to question everything, always question authority. I'm just going to say it time after time. So today we're going to look at the incredible progress that non-speaking children with autism are making. For years, parents were told that their kids didn't have a future, that they were cognitively impaired. And as I've said, that view is just plain wrong. And a lot of these non-speakers are dealing with neurological challenges that are very serious: apraxia, dyspraxia, body betrayal, OCD, motor impairment, Tourette's, all kinds of things. These are things that affect their ability to speak and to control their movement, but these are physical roadblocks, not intellectual roadblocks. And, these kinds of things like impulse regulation problems and Tourette's, or, type 1 diabetes, or all of the different comorbidities. The truth is that many non-speaking autistic individuals have an incredibly rich cognitive life, and that they're trapped in their own bodies. And so their extraordinary gifts are, shielded or, are hidden from the public. And that's, unimaginably difficult. And, so when the New York Times stands up and it backs the people, the government officials, the politicians, all of these different groups and the corporations who made our children suffer, who created this problem. These are people, these children, these parents, they were poisoned for a generation. And we as a country stood by and allowed it until Secretary Kennedy and thousands of mothers, Maha moms, the mothers of autistic kids, but, so many people fought back. And the New York Times then wrote hit pieces about the people who were trying to undo the damage that had been done and to support people who had suffered. And the moms and the dads, they're heroes who've been cast as villains. And they should be on the front pages of newspapers. They should be on the Today Show, on Joe Rogan. They should have statues built to them. I mean, these parents and these kids have suffered in ways that are unimaginable. So make no mistake, autism is not easy. It's not kind. It's not like the movie Rain Man. It's not gentle. It's not something anybody would want. And these parents, thousands of them, and these children, they are fighters. They're warriors. These kids are fighting for their lives. So, when parents and, practitioners can start communicating with their kids through letterboards and keyboards, they finally get to meet these children, and these children finally get to express the things that are in their hearts, their humor, their intelligence, their emotion, their creativity, their dreams. So these young people aren't just surviving. Many of them, they can thrive. After all they've been through, they can thrive. But they need a society that's going to encourage that, that's going to reimburse that. They can go to college, they can write books, they can advocate for others. And they're changing the way that we, all of us, and that the whole world thinks about autism. So today is more about sharing these methods of communication. It's about inspiring all of you in the MAHA movement to stand up for the fundamental right of these children and of non-speakers of all ages to communicate and to be heard. So on today's show, you're going to hear from pediatric chiropractor Tony Ebel, from Dawn Marie Galvin, co-founder of the Speller's Method and an author, from J.B. Handley and his son, Jamie Handley, who wrote the book Underestimated, from Caden Larson, founder of Communication and Disability Empowerment and Sigma 2 Chi, from author Helena Hjalmarsson, the mother of my daughter, Lena Hjalmarsson Lyons, and author of the forthcoming memoir, My Life on This Planet. And then from Mary Holland, CEO of Children's Health Defense, from Elizabeth Bonker, Executive Director of Communication for All, and from functional medicine practitioner Daniel Pompa. Let's get started with pediatric neurologist John Gaetanis. Dr. Gaetanis got his medical degree from Dartmouth and Brown, top colleges in the country. His research focuses on better biomarkers and therapeutics for epilepsy, and he sits on the faculty of the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs, an organization devoted to caring for children and young adults with autism and other chronic complex conditions. Welcome, Dr. Gaetanis.
Thanks for having me, Tony, and thanks for that great introduction to this really, really important topic. The first part, I want to give a little shout out to MAPS, the Medical Academy of Pediatrics and Special Needs. That's an organization that's really working hard to retrain physicians towards a different path of how to treat, heal, and recover kids with autism spectrum disorders, as well as a host of other neurological conditions. And it's a really critical part of what we have to do is to retrain physicians from all that they learned. And the reason that's important is, as you touched on, is that we have a lot of misconceptions within medicine. A lot of things that are accepted as doctrine that simply aren't so. I'll give you one real simple example, is this term autism spectrum disorder. Now, what's the evidence that it's a spectrum? We really don't have any. I mean, it's a theory that is just unsupported. The idea of spectrum is that these are all the same condition or related conditions that just have a wide range. But what if these are completely separate conditions that are just being folded into the same title? One example of that is this issue of regression, which I think really helps distinguish many kids. Within regression, though, many of those kids are the kids who had motor symptoms. And we don't have a separate subclassification in autism for kids with a motor version of it, or primary motor disability. And I think that's a really critical point to make, because for many kids who have a motor disorder, this behaves a lot more like Parkinson's disease than it does, like, say, a developmental condition. And what I mean by that is, in Parkinson's, people have trouble with initiating movement and coordinating movement. And so in Parkinson's, if you were to give an IQ test to somebody who was really struggling with movement, they might not perform very well, and you might miscalculate their intellect. So Stephen Hawkins did not have Parkinson's, but just think of Stephen Hawkins as a great example of that. He had a motor neuron disability, but the same idea is true. If we assessed his IQ based on his spoken language in his later days, one might have thought that he's very intellectually disabled. That's clearly not the case. So why this is important? Well, I think we could say we have a generation of kids who've been mislabeled as having intellectual disability, who actually have primarily a motor disability, and yet we've been treating them as though they have intellectual disability, and we've been preventing them or really hindering them from being able to unlock their potential. And we sometimes use the term locked in or locked in syndrome for people who can't initiate a movement, can't show us their intellect, and are somewhat trapped. And that's sadly where a whole generation of kids is locked in. And what's really critical, and this is part of what MAPS is really focused on, is how do we unlock these kids? Really having that goal to unlock them. And the two best ways to do that, one is through medical support, treating the underlying inflammatory, metabolic conditions that are underlying a large part of the developmental disability. If those aren't addressed, the kids are simply not going to be able to achieve their maximum development. because they're living in chronic pain, GI distress, chronic allergies, other situations like that are really preventing their recovery and healing. So that's what MAPS teaches clinicians, and that's what we have to really all learn to do. Once that kid has gone through that medical healing, the next part is really the fun part, because that next part is when you can sit with the family and say, I think we're ready. I think we're ready to really begin to take that step towards spelling, towards unlocking everything that's always been in there. And for kids to do well with it, they have to be pretty well regulated. They really should not be in pain or major discomfort. But once you get a kid who's really ready to take on that step and is in a good place, once they start spelling, you begin to realize that this kid, A, that they don't have an intellectual disability. They're smart. They're often the smartest kid in the room. B, they don't really have a social disability. It turns out many are some of the most empathic kids that I've ever met. And so they're communicating well, they're social, they're connected. And all of that really, at the end, makes you really wonder, do they even have what we call autism? And that's what I've wondered with so many of my patients. As you get to know them more, you realize they don't really meet those criteria, because really what they had was a motor disability. And unfortunately, they got trapped into this label that just was very inaccurate. And even worse still, and I'll end on this, is sadly, so many of these kids are placed on antipsychotics because we don't realize just how brilliant they are. And that's not the path we should ever take. I'll leave it on that, but we have a great future ahead. So I appreciate you having me.
Thanks, John. That was great. And it's such an important point that I just want to keep on, getting out there in the next hour, which is that these kids need to be unlocked and unleashed, and we have to make sure that we don't have a system that prevents them from making that kind of progress. So thanks so much for the work that you're doing. Next up, we have Dr. Tony Ebel, and he's a certified pediatric and wellness chiropractor with nearly 20 years of clinical experience and the lead teacher behind PX Docs, reaching tens of thousands of parents, and teaching them all about the nervous system's role in their child's health and development. He's trained over 1,000 pediatric and family chiropractors through his clinical program, taught in collaboration with Life University. And he's a contributor to the MAHA Chiropractic Working Group and host of the Experience Miracles podcast. Dr. Tony is a leading voice on autism, birth trauma, nervous system dysregulation, and drug-free whole child healing. Thanks so much, Dr. Tony, for coming on.
Tell you what, thank you so much for having me, Tony. Not only are you guys doing the most brilliant and impactful work with all things MAHA, but you, sir, have the most brilliant first name one could ever hope for. That's for sure. Parents, before I was any of what you just heard in that introduction, I was a dad. I became a father just 2 weeks before I graduated from chiropractic school. And as it does for so many of us parents, all parents, the birth of our baby girl, about to go off to college in a few months, shaped everything. After Addison was born, I immediately shifted my professional focus from what I thought I was going to be, a pretty standard chiropractic sports injury doc, to signing up for advanced certifications in pediatrics, which would then lead me down the road and the deep dive into autism, ADHD, and these neurodevelopmental disorders. And thankfully, these classes were taught by other pediatric chiropractors and integrated pediatricians who were fully locked in on root cause, knowing that autism is both a spectrum with varying degrees of challenges to a degree, and a multifactorial, multi-systems issue that can't simply be blamed on genetics or better diagnosis alone. And like parents, I was first told to blame genetics. Children with a genetic code of autism were destined to struggle, need medication, therapy, ABA, that's it. They'll just get by with that. I knew immediately that was junk science. There had to be more to the science and the story, and there had to be a way that I could figure out to help these kids heal and fully thrive. So I kept digging deeper, just like parents. From there, I sat front row at the Defeat Autism Now, TACA, MAPS, Children's Health Defense conferences, and there I'd come to meet and learn from legendary impact makers who are now leading this MAHA movement, Secretary Kennedy, Dr. Larry Palevsky, and so many more. And once I started to learn about environmental toxins, antibiotic and vaccine overuse, the gut, brain, immune system, neuroinflammation, dysregulation part of the autism story, it was all real as rain. But still, like many parents of children with autism, I had a gut feeling that something was missing. And what I'm about to take you through didn't come from conferences or research publications. It honestly came from sitting knee to knee with moms and actually fully listening to them. As pediatric chiropractors, I always joke we're the OGs of root cause and drug-free nervous system care. And it's that deep understanding of the nervous system that allows us to dig deeper, further upstream than anybody else. And with autism being a multi-system, whole body challenge, you have to start with the nervous system. You got to start by asking where the neurodevelopment gets thrown off track in the first place, or when it gets thrown off track. And it's way earlier than we're told. And so when I did exactly that, dive fully into hundreds, now thousands, actually tens of thousands of case histories in our clinic, here's what we found. Over 85% of our patients with autism, whether level 1, 2, 3, profound, or whatever criteria you use, they have what we now call birth trauma. Like every medical intervention, these procedures can be life-saving, but they can also be life-altering. Forceps, vacuum, induction, epidural, C-section. There it was, hidden in plain sight the whole time with all these case histories. That physical, manual trauma, yanking, twisting, pulling on a baby's delicate neck, brainstem, vagus nerve, and autonomic air traffic control center, which is right there in the brainstem during the most critical first moments of life. Once the brainstem, spinal cord, vagus nerve are all thrown off track, the entire nervous system shifts into sympathetic dominance, dysautonomia, dysregulation, or what we in chiropractic call subluxation. And that's a disconnection. And from there, the 4 downstream systems and the key systems to development and health, sleep, feeding, regulation, off track from day one, gut, digestion, detoxification, offline, immune system suppressed, inflammation running rampant. And here's where the motor system shows up. That subluxation at the brainstem and within the neurospinal system throws off the development of motor planning, tone, and coordination. And that needs to be done first before speech, verbalization, socialization, and other brain functions come fully online later on. So here's what we have to understand, and the rest of this hour is going to make beautifully clear. These kids are not broken. They are the most brilliant, creative, innovative minds inside those kiddos. They are fully present, fully aware, fully capable. What's disconnected is the bridge between that brilliant mind and the body that's supposed to carry it out into the world, including the neurosensory motor execution of verbal speech. Birth trauma and subluxation don't take away the brilliance of these kids. They lock them into what we call the perfect storm of sympathetic dominance, dysregulation, and downstream dysfunction. And once we can understand that, everything changes. Tony, these kids don't grow out of early life challenges, colic, constipation, difficulty latching and breastfeeding, chronic ear infections, sleep disturbances, sensory issues, tantrums, meltdowns, developmental delays. Those grow into autoimmune and autism spectrum disorders. One struggle, one diagnosis, one specialist after another, yet no one looks deep enough into the nervous system or directly enough to find that foundational root cause until they meet us. We dig deep into that case history. We run the neurological testing through what we call our insight scans, thermal, HRV, EMG, and we find that nervous system dysregulation and subluxation, that foundational root challenge. And even though it's often missed in the biomedical integrative world, it's the one key that unlocks healing for the gut, for the immune system, and so many other things so we can work in harmony with these kids, with their parents, and with other providers. So I'll leave you with this. The earliest, most obvious, yet overlooked root cause of these challenges doesn't show up in the genetic code. It may not show up on labs, and it may not only come from environmental toxins. That over-medicalization of the most exciting, impactful first moment of life, birth, is a trigger in that perfect storm. But here's the good news. Once we see it, we know it, we understand it, we can do something about it. Millions of families are finding their way through the storm with drug-free, root-cause, nervous system-focused chiropractic care. And that can be a foundational first step in the path forward. I'm so grateful to this Maha movement and this moment in time that God has given us to finally restore hope, give answers, and get these incredible, brilliant kids the drug-free help and nervous system-focused solutions they so badly deserve and need. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. That was a great presentation. You're clearly just doing great work, and I hope a lot of people who see you on this show contact you and get the help that you can obviously give them. So thanks for coming on.
connection or your connection, but so your tongue, the jaw, the soft palate. These are all fine motor movements. And for non-speakers, that ability to do so is very consistently inconsistent. The intention might be there, but the signal to execute those movements doesn't come through. So, and then we fade out our prompting once they've mastered it. And why it works is because the shoulder movement is initiated by larger, more accessible muscle groups. It's an easier motor pathway to master when you have apraxia. But here's the thing, you can't just hand somebody a letterboard and say, talk to me, or spell what you know. You have to teach the coordination of their hand and eye movements first. And this is really important, you have to help co-regulate their body, which we know has sensory motor differences. And by co-regulating them with our presence and our voice, the speller can then focus all their energy on improving the accuracy of their looking and pointing. Dr. Elizabeth Torres has published lots of research on the sensory motor feedback loop and the neurological noise in the system of a person with autism. It's very informative research on this topic. But back to how it works. On the 3 boards, we start everybody on these stencils or letterboards where the alphabet is split across 3. That way the targets are much larger, and the learner has to get their eyes to the target letter, hold their gaze there, and then bring their finger or pencil to make contact. So eyes first and then connection second. You can think of it like teaching someone to play baseball, right? Before you can hit a home run, you got to get your eye on the ball, and then the hand has to swing and hit the ball and stay connected the whole time. And we're building that hand-eye coordination, that motor planning, again, starting at the shoulder level, not at the fingers level. And so what we see is once you start teaching that motor skill, you start progressing up a continuum to more complex letterboards. So you start on the 3 boards. Eventually, you get to a letterboard that has the whole alphabet on 1 board. You can move on from there to also a laminated letterboard and then a QWERTY keyboard, a regular keyboard, usually attached to an iPad so you have voice output. Now, once you're on 26 letters, you can spell anything. So this is when you can go from learning to actual application, and you can start having communication. You can answer multiple choice questions. You can answer questions that you don't know the answer to that's open-ended. And what we see through spelling is that these individuals are cognitively no less than anyone else. They always had language and they had knowledge. What they were missing was a reliable motoric way to show it. And here's what makes this really significant. No one had been teaching kids this skill, the motor skill. The assumption was always that non-speaking autism or Down syndrome were intellectual disabilities. So when a child couldn't point to the correct flashcard to identify a tree versus a house, the world would say, oh, they don't know the difference. It must be a receptive.
And it keeps freezing. But, as Bobby Kennedy said when he went to Boston and mentioned he was going to run for president, all the sound went off, all the tech stopped. And he joked that, that this was the beginning of a very big battle. And that, when you go up against some of the most powerful people on the planet, it's not strange that Zoom doesn't work. And it's not strange that the New York Times and all kinds of other places write stories that are that go after you. But Dawn Marie, I just want to say that you're doing a fantastic job. That I want everybody who's hearing this to get to know you, to contact you. Where can people contact you?
Easiest place to reach us is at spellers.com. We have a group of people running. We'll help you find a provider in your area or reach me directly.
Maha Warrior. 3 fantastic books. One of them is called Finding Leaders Who Do Not Benefit from These Kinds of Stories. And maybe that has some role in it, but Helena is here now. We can't hear you.
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
and, I'm not sure whether you heard that I was saying that there are a lot of very powerful forces that don't want wonderful, hardworking, courageous women like you to come on and tell this kind of story. So I'm glad to have you here, and welcome.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet. And I'm really, I don't know if you guys heard that I already said it twice. I'm really happy to be here with this wonderful group of people who are fighting for our kids. And I want to start with just reading something that Lena, our daughter, said about letterboard. So I asked her, what does letterboard symbolize to you? What does the letterboard symbolize to you? And she wrote, my letterboard is my realization of love and truth. She mastered my communication and loved my communication so much that she let me poke at her night and day. She is harvesting my inner world. One morning, she was so happy about me that she flew into my mouth. My lovely letterboard was so happy about me that she wanted to jump into my mouth and help me speak. She's thin and frail, but also adventurous. I thought that's a brilliant way to describe, how actually the letterboard and other ways of communicating, typing and so forth, actually is a bridge, and that will help mend this body betrayal, if you will, or this disconnect between the brain and the body, and that actually letterboard spelling, as Soma often says, Soma Mukhopadhyay, who invented spelling from the beginning, she said that letterboard spelling is not it's not an end in and of itself. It's a way to move towards towards speech. And that speech is the end result. So that, and I'm noticing that with my daughter Lena, our daughter Lena, she is very often verbalizing what she's spelling at this point. And the more she spells, the more she opens up the blocked motor pathways, and so that she can actually say the words that she's spelling, so that it's actually benefiting speech also. For all the people who are criticizing the method, that's just yet another argument that letterboard spelling is promoting everything we want to promote: integration, calm, of course, the most important of all, expression, and learning and interaction, and being able to really understand who our kids are. And there are so many things. Lena is, I think, very capable of capturing her understanding of the complexity of autism. Autism is brutal. It is brutal. And you go to places you never, ever thought in your wildest imagination you'd have to go to, and see your kids suffering on that level. It's unthinkable, and I wish it on no one. And I'm so happy and grateful for all the work that Bobby Kennedy is doing, and my ex-husband, and all of you, Mary Holland, everyone, to really begin to show the world how money and big pharma and all of that is impacting in very brutal ways our kids. But also Lena, in her book, My Life on the Planet, she's been writing for maybe, I think it's been a process of 3 years. It's a slow process, but she's been very motivated to do it, because she feels that everyone should hear from, everyone should be supported in helping to understand who she is, and who her people with this condition, who they are. And she is describing education. She's talking about communication. She has a very long chapter in her book on words of advice to people on the sidelines, because the OCD and anxiety and the words that comes out of our kids' mouth are so persuasive. It's hard not to believe that when Lena says 5 times, olives, or I want to go and do, this or that, that it's actually not what she's thinking about at all. She is a very sophisticated thinker, and she's also so many more things than her cognitive ability, and she's for her, the realm between this world and other worlds is not that thick. So she has an understanding of who someone is on the soul level, and she can she can read auras. She can actually connect with people that are very far away. Those are things we are not used to thinking about, but I believe that all of this is going to gradually become common knowledge. I think maybe our kids are uniquely qualified to describe the other worlds or the magic that actually, if we knew it, we would all have access to. But that's also in Lena's book. But she's also describing education that is degrading and kind of humiliating. She has learned about Thanksgiving and Christmas 100 million times, and she knows about Thanksgiving and Christmas, but she's actually interested in literature and poetry and anthropology and religion and the humanities, and she is actually really very good at math. She has a lot of natural abilities, both cognitively and also empathically, and I think she's not afraid to describe both the brutality of autism and also the very special connectedness that very often she experiences, and the universal consciousness, the love that comes out of her in a way that feels very liberating, and the way that she can look at people and see who they are on a soul level. There's a lot of those kinds of, I don't know what to call it, that kind of connection that she's also talking about in this book. So yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. You are just an incredible hero. You've given everything to Lena, and there's really just no more important work that I think anybody can do than the work that you do, and that so many mothers and fathers have done for their kids who are sick. Just so many people suffering through just unspeakable, traumatic years, often by themselves, and just never quitting, and that resilience is just it's great to talk about the work that Secretary Kennedy does, or that so many powerful politicians are doing, and so many people in the MAHA movement are working towards. But it really is so important to recognize the people who day after day, often 20 hours per day, like you, who just suffer through so much, but also triumph through it, and have the greatest victories. So like Bobby Kennedy says, a sick person has one dream, and that's a dream to get healthy, and a healthy person has 1,000 dreams. And the work that you do, and that so many mothers do, and so many dads do, gives their children back the 999 dreams that they weren't able to have. So thank you so much, and great to listen to you on this show.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Jamie and JB Handley, and Jamie is the best-selling author of Underestimated, and he wrote it with his father. He's a 23-year-old non-speaker with autism, He started to learn about spelling to communicate, S2C, at the age of 17. And he's currently a junior at Portland State University and just doing really, really well. Just an incredible story. And it's a story that everybody needs to hear. You know, people need to know these stories about my daughter, about Jamie, about so many other people who are really succeeding after such incredibly difficult years. So welcome, JB and Jamie.
Tony, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
I would just make a few comments, Tony. I really loved listening to all your guests. And when Jamie first started to spell, he was going to an autism school here in the greater Portland area called Victory Academy. And they were more of an ABA school. And we started having these miracles with Jamie, in large part thanks to Don Marie, who everybody met just a moment ago, who helped Jamie become open. And what was amazing at the time was that even in a school that Jamie had attended for 8 years, there were many teachers and a speech language pathologist who literally would not willingly sit in the same room as Jamie to watch him spell. They drew a hard line because what I said as a parent, we were trying to get the letterboard into the school. And what I said was, as a parent, was, well, just come watch him do it, right? Just see it for yourself. And the fact that otherwise well-meaning people were unwilling to even watch Jamie spell told me what resistance we would have to this method and to this process. And it's pretty amazing when I bring people into our home who are a little bit more open-minded and they watch Jamie spell for the first time. It's kind of like a religious experience or awakening. It's very emotionally intense for the people who bear witness because, and I remember when Del Bigtree did it. Del actually came to my house and filmed the whole show here in Lake Oswego. And Del had to watch for the first time a child spell at the level of sophistication that Jamie spells at. And he was deeply moved. They filmed it, etc. Yeah. And part of why I wanted to be on this show was that we got so frustrated that the New York Times allowed that editorial from Amy Lutz to run, because Amy's a well-known antagonist. She follows me around on message boards and constantly harasses me. She's a severe annoyance to this community. But even worse, she's a bald-faced liar. She states that what we're doing is facilitated communication, which most people would interpret as, the physical grabbing of somebody's hand or arm to go to different letters. And I think we would all be, pretty opposed to that unless it was part of a progression, as Don Marie talked about earlier. And what's really insane for somebody in my position, like 95% of the time, Jamie spells off of this that sits there on a table by itself with nobody touching it. When he's a little more nervous or we're in this kind of live environment, I actually mount his keyboard, right? So it sits there like this. But the one thing I don't do is I don't physically touch him or hold the keyboard or anything else. And if you look on Asha's website or anybody else's website, they've said for years that a mounted communication device is a reliable form of communication. And so I don't really understand what we're arguing about when people like Jamie exist and are communicating on a mounted device. And by the way, one of the first things that Jamie would say is that the holding of devices is what allowed him to progress to a mounted device. I think we all understand how training wheels work. It's the exact same dynamic at play here. And how many Jamies do we need before this stops being a question anymore? Because thank God there's so many people like everybody on this call who believe in our children. And it's been interesting. I've run into like biomedical doctors for whom realizing that these children are cognitively intact has changed the entire course of how they treat the children, because they're no longer worried about a cognitive disability. They're realizing that it's something going on in the motor area. And so I did I did ask Jamie right before the call. I'll let you type it again, dude, just so you can kind of, but I'll ask you the same question. Do you want to say anything about people who doubt that spelling is real? Go ahead. Yeah, you can do it. Yep, get there. Go ahead. Yep, get there. You're doing it. Yep, go ahead. Yep, get there. You got it. Yeah, you got it. And then,
Get a lot.
So Jamie wrote, "Get a life." I think that kind of sums it up. The truth is that, like, I spend zero time in my day worrying about the haters. Jamie communicates with us all the time on this letterboard many times a day. He gets his needs met. He's happy. He's joyful. He's having a great life. And I think, like many skeptics and doubters, refrigerator mother theory, whatever it was, this tidal wave is going to run all those people over. And honestly, Tony, it's you publishing our book, doing shows like this. More people join the movement. More people end up with a speller like Jamie, who's communicating on a mounted board. And again, how many Jamies do you need before Amy Lutz's opinion is viewed for the absurd gobbledygook that it really is? You want to say something? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. And then, yep. Get there. Go ahead. You got it. Yeah, you got it. And then, you got it. Yeah, do it. And then, yeah, get there. You're doing it. Try it.
The parents and the children, children who have autism, and the work that they're doing, the brave, just day and night work that they're doing, just really struggling to have lives that are interesting and exciting, and that Caden learn to spell and to give him the opportunities that doctors would have said were just never possible. So he now goes to Normandale Community College, focusing on history and political science. In 2020, founded the organization Communication and Disability Empowerment Now. He actively meets with lawmakers to advocate for non-speakers and other marginalized people. And then Jennifer, once again, Caden's mom, is the founder and CEO of a software company called Sigma 2, as well as the owner of the Holland Center, a biomedical and autism treatment clinic. They've recently worked on an important law, that they're trying to get passed that would help children with disabilities. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, hi guys, Tony, thanks for having me. Cade is very